Well, I'll be honest, I didn't think this will actually happen. They actually managed to get to the last one of 2020 without humanity completely crashing down and failing. And if you did tomorrow, then it's definitely not me and not my fault for jinxing it. But hi! Welcome everyone to the last MOSER of 2020! I don't want to waste too much time on this because that's what the outro is for. So without too much of a drag, let's get into the last MOSER for an absolutely bizarre year. MOSER20's December. Starting this off with one of the best first episodes I've seen in a while. Everything about the show is absolutely flawless. The writing is completely different from the usual object show style. This seems to be a show about the everyday life of objects living in the area, although I can be mistaken, which all have their own unique identities, like ages, unique names, pronouns, and even neo-pronouns. That's a really brave step to take, and I really encourage that. Most of them aren't even starting their object either. Hell, one of the characters is literally Earth, and they nailed the concept of each character. The voice acting was really unlike any object show because there was so many new voices I didn't recognize. All of the voices really went with the characters, and I'm really impressed. Speaking of impressed, the animation was actually phenomenal. Seeing how each character has a different style, it still amazes me how no part of the animation looked different. Since they all have their own unique designs, it really seems like it would be easy to have something disproportionate, but there was nothing of the sort. Oh, speaking of their designs, I don't think there was any words to describe how much I loved it. They really took their concept of objects and not objects and made a complete spectrum of it. Each character has its own design, limbs, and not one design similar to the other. The backgrounds were detailed, but not to the point where it's distracting. It really helped set up each scenes as the scenes switched places so frequently so you could see how big their world is. Editing wise, everything was so much more than smooth, and there were no errors that were noticeable, and creativity absolutely skyrocketed and reached the sun. I cannot express how much of an eye-opener this was to the actual concept you can have with out-of-the-mold object show. But to sum up, I'll give 5 for everything. So in total it'll be 30 out of 30. I am so happy to open this month with this, and I have such high hopes for this object show. But now, on to the next review. Alright, so I'll be honest, 1 usually has me hooked with the episode, but something just didn't quite was there this time. On the aspect of writing, it's still pretty much the same format, which I really like. However, I don't really understand nor like the idea of more and more contestants being added. Maybe it's to add more mystery and quirkiness into the show. I get that it's probably because there was only 6, but in my opinion, that was what made it special. However, I am not disappointed at all from the new characters. Abstracti is such a cool concept character, and it says anything to people's faces. Folder is a really cool concept as a computer assistant type, but it feels like a robot more than anything. Stone is one of the best characters, and them speaking in a sign language is so special as I don't think I've seen it in any object show before. However, more on the episode aspect itself, splitting into teams wasn't that good in my opinion. Sure, it was probably necessary since you couldn't do a lot of the challenges with 16 people, but it just puts everything into a format again. The challenge itself is really simple, and it's probably pretty much the style for the object show, so I don't have much complaints about that. I also don't have complaints about the voice acting. Everything was stellar about it. I especially love Folder's voice as it has a special effect of an old school computer, going back to the concept I made earlier. The characters still had a lot of emotions and stayed in proportion to their characters. Speaking of proportion, the animation is still one of the best aspects. It's just really cool how every scene and every episode stay in style. Of course, it is animated by one person, so it's kind of obvious, but nonetheless, it's still really impressive. Speaking of impressive was the sound design. Something that a past guest pointed out was that how it absolutely blows the roof with the sound design, and it still shines here. I think the best example is how Text's voice is a bunch of key smashes, but it sounds like it's coming from right in front of you, or how Abstract he sounds with its movement. For something that really doesn't change its visual design at all, I just gotta say, he puts so much effort into the sound design. The editing was really good. No noticeable changes or errors. Creativity nailed it with the new characters. It was the main focus of the episode. And I guess we'll see what happens if they add more. But to sum up, I'll give writing 4 and 5 to the rest, resulting in 29 out of 30. I really hope that 1 doesn't become formatic and stays true to its core. It's still one of the best shows out there. But now, on to the next review. Well, I gotta say, this episode wasn't its best potential. It doesn't mean it's bad, but it's just, anyone could have done more. To start off, the writing was pretty okay. However, I feel like CJ's writing as a character isn't all that well. The overuse of the word wimp makes him feel artificial and not really like a real mean character. It just feels like he's there for the sense of being there and being mean, and nothing is really done in actuality. The challenge went good, however, I don't think 𝕰 shined enough. Especially after Cat Car joined her, it's as if they were forgotten about. In the terms of voice acting, all of them were pretty good. A lot of great voices like Cactus, CJ, Blueberry, and TV really show their emotions and match themselves into situations. However, Badge's voice was really unenthusiastic at times, considering how the dialogue he had. Everyone else didn't have any problems. I did have problems, however, with the animatic. There was a lot of noticeable changes in the animatic. Every scene looked different, and it was really distracting. Some of the scenes had really good lip sync and movements, and some had really squished faces and no lip sync. With that, there was a lot of size changes throughout the episode. The one I noticed the most was Cologne and Blueberry. On one scene, they're close to the same size, but then in another, Blueberry is small enough to fit in his arms. I'm sure this can be fixed with setting up proportions and guidance for the animatic. However, there's still a visual problem that I carried from the last episode, and it's when things happen, but it's not clear visually. When Checker took that rock and suddenly a lot of rocks came in and closed them in, I couldn't really understand what was happening until they mentioned it. It's just something to work on is all. Design was still really good. However, even though it was a bit pixely at times, I get that it's an issue and it wasn't too distracting. Although editing was a bit distracting. Going back to what I said about the rock scene, there wasn't really a sound to indicate what happened too. It just sounded like rocks moving, and it didn't even sound like a lot of rocks like there was visually. But music didn't overlap and the voices were still very clear, so it's not too big of an issue. In the aspect of creativity, it went pretty smoothly, but I feel like they could have done more with the challenge. To sum up, I'd give 3 for writing, 4.5 for voice acting, 2.5 for animatic, 4.5 for design, 4 for editing, and 4 for creativity. So an overall of 22.5 out of 30. The show really can improve, and I hope this helped with future episodes. But now, on to the next review. After finishing the episode, I'd say that it had some really good shining points. The voice acting and the design were really good throughout it. Writing-wise, it wasn't exactly the best though. There was a bunch of cliche moments, like the tiebreaker, and the personalities didn't feel that interesting and very 2D in the way they act. However, it is just the first episode and we barely know the characters, so I'm not gonna make a big deal out of it. Speaking of the tiebreaker, I thought that was a really nice touch on the name of the show. The challenge wasn't too appealing, if I'll be honest. As a challenge in general, I don't think it's too good of a concept, and in my opinion, it came out a bit messy and a little too long. It really got dull as it went on. But what wasn't dull was the voice acting. I really tried to be the best in voice acting, and I do think it's one of my best work. And I really do think that everyone else really did their best in this. Everyone had emotions and context to the lines and seemed to give their part to the episode. On the aspect of animatic was a bit hard to tell. Some of the expressions didn't seem like they fit too much with the lines, and even when they all stayed in the same style, some were a bit off proportion wise. It looked pretty laggy and slow during the challenge, which is one of the reasons I don't think sport challenges work too well in those. To each their own though. The designs were pretty good for real. I'm a bit disappointed there was only one background used because I think more would have added to the feel of the area and helped some of the shots more. The assets were accurate and simple though. And on the editing phase, I spotted a bunch of problems. Lip sync was off for most of the episode, and it was a bit distracting. Going back to the background point I mentioned, a lot of the same background was used in the same position, so it just seemed really weird that they didn't even switch places when showing them. Goes back to my suggestion to make more backgrounds. The music was a bit too loud at times, most noticeably at the first and second scene, and some of the music didn't fit what happened in the scene, like in the challenge where a pop music played over a seemingly slow soccer scene. But on the aspect of creativity, I like that they just had a cardboard box as a competitor, just because they didn't have anyone else. It was pretty funny. The challenge was pretty creative, even though it wasn't executed too well. But to sum up, I'd give writing 3.5, voice acting 5, animatic 3, design 4, editing 2.5, and creativity 3.5. A total of 21.5 out of 30. I know this show has a lot of potential, and this is only the first episode. It can only get better from here. But now, onto the last review. this episode was actually a really good improvement from the last one I saw. Starting from the writing, most of the episode revolved around the debut, which, in that part, 𝕀ℕ℃𝕃𝕊 speech was really stale. It felt unnecessarily long. The challenge was a tad bit confusing, and I didn't actually understand what they needed to do in order to win. However, it was pretty simple, I think. Voice acting didn't disappoint at all. They still nail it, and it's really impressive how even the recommended characters had unique voices. That's a lot of effort. And speaking of effort, animation was just incredible. Everything was stayed into consistent style, and it was really smooth and impressive. It was just so eye-pleasing, and I loved every bit of it. I also loved every bit of the designs. The backgrounds are the thing that improved the most all throughout. They look so much better than they did in past episodes. They have a lot more detail in comparison. Even the seeds and bushes looked really good for just props in the episode. Seriously, a lot of kudos goes to the visual team of the episode. I gotta say, editing was a bit more tricky. In the butte scene, the music kinda interrupted some of the interactions, and I also feel like there was a specific moment that could have been funnier, where Slushy talked to TV, but she was on mute and couldn't respond, but the music kept on going. In my opinion, if the music also cut at the same moment when TV was muted, it would make it a bit more funny. And in the aspect of creativity, the challenge was pretty new and an interesting concept. However, I don't think the execution on it was too well. Also, I just want to note that I really like 𝕀ℕ𝑃𝕃𝕃's design. I think it's really creative. But with that said, I'll sum up everything. I'll give writing 4.5, voice acting, animation, and design 5, editing 4, and creativity 4.5. And overall, 28 out of 30. This show really steps up every episode, and I really want to see what they have in store for the next. Well, this is what I wanted to say at the intro. I'll be honest, this project had one hell of a ride this year. A lot of motivation and a lot of demotivation, all coming in and out, and for a lot of the time, I didn't know what I wanted to do and how I wanted to write everything. But now, I'm more than sure that what I want to do with this project. And as long as it helps people, that's what I'm gonna keep on doing. If you're a creator, which I helped in any way, shape, or form, please let me know. I'd love to see some people who I actually helped and be sure that my work isn't for nothing. I gotta give the biggest motivation to continue MOSER to everyone who keep on tuning into MOSERs, because all it is at the end is just some person talking about their opinions and try to help people to improve, and it means a lot when people actually like it and want it to continue. I want to give the biggest thanks to my script editor, Rosie. She really makes sure that my opinions are completely neutral, I don't come off too negative, and she helps me with dealing with everything. But to close off this year of MOSER, I just want to say two simple words. Thank you. Thank you for understanding me when I needed breaks. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making 2020 bearable. Let's just hope it'll be better next year, and stay optimistic. Love you, Valids. Stay safe.